Remember how we've been told time and time again that about 50% of gun crime is carried out thanks to legally registered guns that are being trafficked? Well, talk about fake news. What an amazing story to appear in the CBC of all places, a news organization that is hardly pro-gun. You see, the CBC decided to check out the ongoing narrative about where guns are being sourced from when it comes to criminal acts being committed in Canada. Especially since we've been led to believe that half of those guns are illegally smuggled from the United States, whereas the other half are illegal guns that have been trafficked by law-abiding gun owners to criminals, a number that has always made me raise a Spockian eyebrow. Indeed, check out this clip from last month in which we caught up with Mayor John Tory, who recited the 50-50 stat pertaining to gun sourcing during a conversation with a concerned resident on Danforth Avenue, the scene of Toronto's latest mass shooting.
We have had so many shootings in Toronto lately. What can you say to that?
Well, I can say to that we're going to try and get the guns off the streets,
Where are the guns coming from?
Well, 50% are coming from the United States and 50% are being purchased legally here and then trafficked.
Yeah, how does that saying go again? There are lies, damn lies, and statistics? Because the thing is, when law enforcement and our elected officials refer to the statistics, usually there's a source for those stats. But that's the really amazing factor regarding the CBC report. Not only does the 50% stat not exist, but it turns out there's no concrete info regarding gun crime stats to begin with either. For example, reporter Evan Dwyer notes that RCMP Inspector Chris McBrien told the Vancouver Sun 2 years ago the following, quote, "It is a fact that the majority of gun-related crimes in our communities are committed with guns that are domestically sourced," end quote. Now, you'd think this would be a solid statistic given that Inspector McBrien was speaking as head of the Western Canada Division of the National Weapons Enforcement Support Team of the Canadian Firearms Program. Meaning that if anyone should know the nitty-gritty pertaining to guns, it would surely be McBrien. But when the CBC contacted the Canadian Firearms Program and asked to look at the data behind his categorical statement, the RCMP replied that, well, no such data exists. Here's what the RCMP said in a statement, quote, "Inspector McBrien's statement would have been based on information available to him at that time. However, this information would not have provided a complete national picture of the sources of crime guns, as no such data exists," end quote. Oh, but it gets worse because RCMP Sergeant Marie Demain further adds, quote, "Currently, there is no national repository for this type of information in Canada. The Canadian Firearms Program does not collect or track national statistics with regard to the origin of crime guns," end quote. And yet, the outright lying pertaining to guns continues, even at the very top level. For example, Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale told a Guns and Gangs Summit in Ottawa earlier this year that an increasing number of guns used in crimes in Canada were coming from within the country. Here's what he tweeted, quote, "With so many crime guns coming from legitimate domestic sources, we need effective firearm measures," end quote. But much like Inspector McBrien, where is Minister Goodale getting his data? Seems to me that both these individuals are pulling numbers from a certain orifice where the sun don't shine. In fact, it's really hard to form any kind of picture regarding gun crime stats regarding how flawed the statistical gathering process is. For example, the CBC report notes that the definition of a crime gun is that a gun was used in the commission of a crime. So you would likely assume from that statement that a firearm-related violent crime is a crime in which a gun has been used or at least brandished, right? But no, that's not the case at all. A StatsCan report entitled Firearms and Violent Crime in Canada 2016 notes that for an offense to be considered firearm-related, a firearm need only be present during the commission of the offense, not necessarily used. In other words, folks, as Dyer notes, Suppose there was an altercation between two individuals in a home that leads to a fistfight. The police are called, and after arresting the guilty parties, they notice a gun cabinet and they remove a legally owned rifle from the home. That fistfight will be recorded as a firearm-related violent crime, even though the legal firearm was never removed from its locked case. In fact, the CBC report notes that of 1,140 so-called crime guns seized in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northwest Territories, and the Yukon, in 2016 alone, only 150 guns were actually recovered following specific violent offenses, including disturbance and uttering threats. Bottom line, we can form two conclusions based on this report. First, the collection of gun crime stats in Canada is horrendously flawed, so flawed, in fact, that the data is worse than useless. Secondly, it is downright egregious that law enforcement and elected officials continue to parrot that 50% of the guns used in gun crime are legally registered firearms that have been trafficked. So what, pray tell, is the real reason for this ongoing litany of lies? Is it to vilify law-abiding citizens who are legal gun owners so that even more draconian gun control laws can be implemented? Laws that will do absolutely nothing to make the streets of Canada safer? Because that's what it sure looks like to me. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, the Rebel has a new app. Please download that app and take the Rebel with you wherever you go.